Baseball.
This is the Redbird Report with sports director Wiese and Bob Ramsey.
Powered by Rawlings and the Rawlings Experience
On the Big 550 KTRS.
Welcome into our Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550 KTRS, our KTRS digital platforms on this opening week. Opening day is just about here, and it's going to give us a chance to make some predictions, some thoughts on how the 2025 season is going to play out from a Cardinals perspective, from a MLB perspective. And Rammer, this is Thursday is such a great day in sports. It's opening day, and it sounds like the weather's going to be warm here in St. Louis. And golly, just can't wait to have real baseball with actual games and stats that matter again. Let's go.
Well, we've been wringing our hands and gnashing our teeth all winter long, and now it's time to see if our worries were right on or unfounded. And so it's time to get her going. Well,
let's start with the roster. You know, our last show, we spent a lot of time talking about Victor Scott and would he make the roster? Would he be the opening day center fielder? Well, this was the first domino to fall over the weekend to set your final 26-man roster for the start of the season. Scott is on the team. He's your opening day center fielder. The first domino to fall, I think we're probably both on the same page saying, well done, Cardinals. This was the right move to make.
He earned it. Did you get a sense, and I'm admitting up front, this point's probably not fair, but did you get a sense that the Cardinals were almost reluctant to say, hey, what a great spring. This guy's earned the job. It was almost like they were waiting for him to have a 5-strikeout day and send him back down. Again, I know it's unfair, but it's just a gut feel I had.
Well, and you pointed out this last week, it almost seemed like they were leaving some breadcrumbs for reporters to find and be like, oh, so, well, he's not going to be able to play every day, so he'll be down at AAA. They want to make sure he's up to speed if any injuries happen. It's not going to work right now. Yeah, they left it all out there, and I wonder if it came down to an 11th hour decision. We got to roll with this guy.
He's forced our hand.
Yes, exactly right. He's been your best player, and if this was a competition, if this is a ball club that's trying to build back up from the bottom up and lay a foundation, what better way than to lay a piece down that does everything you want to do, plays defense, has speed, can steal bases, get on base. I hope what we saw in spring is a duplicate of what we'll see all year. Probably not, but if it's anywhere close, this was the guy that had to have his name called, Rammer.
So we start our conversation about roster construction with a tip of the cap to the Cardinals. You got one right.
Yes.
You got one right. He earned it. Now, neither one of us is saying he's going to hit 300. I don't even know if he'll hit. I don't know what he's going to do.
Exactly
but
right.
He earned the spot. Then if he dis-earns it, is that a word? We just made it up. if he falters, okay, I get it. But he earned it. And isn't that what it's supposed to be about? Earning your place in life?
Especially when you've got a team and spots filled with question marks and filled with guys that have, I mean, they're guys that you said, like if Nolan Arenado's on your team, he's your third baseman. That's just the way it is. Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan. There are guys that have just flat out earned it, but there are other spots, especially in the outfield, where you're writing them down in pencil. And there are guys that led the pack. But at some point, you needed somebody to take a job and say, this is mine. Victor Scott did that above everyone else.
So let's move on. Who's your second baseman?
So the second baseman right now, well, I mean, you've championed Brendan Donovan from the get-go. And if Scott is in center, Newt Barr and Burleson, right now it's between Donovan and Gorman, I think Donovan's your everyday second baseman, but I do think there's going to be some fluidity on a day-to-day basis as to who plays. And this is like an overarching theme, I feel, from the Cardinals the last few years. It could be good how they draw it up, but they've got to kind of thread the needle here. Second base,
And
left and
field.
right, maybe even both corner
Yeah.
outfield positions.
Because Newt Barr will be in one of them.
Exactly right. DH, and maybe at times first base, because, again, maybe Contreras is first one day, DH the next. I mean, I think the positions that are locked in is short, third base, catcher, and center field. And everybody else you can kind of piece together with the guys you think are going to be there just about every day, but they're going to be, I mean, if Gorman's on the roster, you've got to give him a shot. If Walker's on the roster, he's got to get at bats. So there's an equation that you have to figure out if you're manager Ali Marmol. Can he get it right?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think it's possible. That's not a shot at him.
Sure.
But just that they put him in an impossible situation. And my thing is, at his age, Walker's got to play. Is he going to play every day? Well, and then your outfield's set. Your outfield is then set, and you've got too many other position players fighting for at-bats. Why should Brendan Donovan have to fight for at-bats? He's your best all-round player and one of your better leaders, and maybe your best leader. And so are you going to tell me Gorman's going to come off the bench or DH? That doesn't make any sense either. I thought for the longest time that if the goal was to trade Arenado at some point, then Gorman should go to Memphis and play third base every day. But I'm getting vibes from Jupiter that the Cardinals don't think they can trade Arenado, period. And if that's the case, then it doesn't make sense to have Gorman go down. So they've got a little bit of a conundrum there.
And you're 100% right. It's tough to navigate right now. I will say this. I could see Donovan playing second and left. I do see him playing every day. I don't think he's one of those guys you sub out and
It'd be dumb.
Unless it's just like a brutally tough lefty that he doesn't hit. Maybe that's a day he sits down. But your point is really a good one here, because when you have this odd number, when you have more players than you do positions to play, that should be a good problem to have.
It should be.
It should be. But how have you constructed your roster? Because if it's a good problem, that means you have a true platoon somewhere, whether it's in right field, whether it's at the DH or first base or wherever. And you don't have that.
Well, let me offer. You got to get creative.
Yep, you do.
If Ollie said, "I'm retiring," and Mo called me, said, "Come on in, fix it," I think I would start with a platoon of Gorman and Walker. The only problem with that is then Walker's only facing left-handed hitters, and what is that, 3 times a week maybe?
Right.
Maybe. And that's probably not enough at bats. But that is a way you could get them both in. You say, well, they play a different position. Well, Gorman plays second, and then Donovan's in the outfield. And then when it's flipped, then Donovan goes to second base. Again, not ideal. I wouldn't advocate that, but it just illustrates the problem I think they have.
And so then it comes down to if you're still trying to squeeze 400 plate appearances from Gorman and Walker.
Each? Or your total?
Let's say each.
Okay.
That's difficult, and it's difficult to do because then you're siphoning at bats away from Burleson and from Newt Barr.
And Baker.
And Baker.
Hitting good lefties.
Right, exactly right. Baker suddenly becomes a guy that becomes more difficult to get in there. And he's 100%.
But he's the guy that can do
exactly.
damage.
He's your true platoon lefty masher that I want in there against every lefty you face.
In a perfect world, I think I'd have he and Burleson platooning at DH. But I might need that spot for these other guys like Gorman.
Totally right.
It's crazy.
Totally right. And yet Baker becomes this extra guy that you want to be able to get involved that becomes difficult and again makes the most sense in a platoon world. I think that's a great possible platoon situation with Burleson and with Baker. But like you said, there are going to be too many other mouths to feed. So
great line. Yeah, you're right.
And it's just it's what we've seen every single year from these guys. And you don't have any clarity. And now I guess if I didn't understand it initially, I definitely understand it now on why they wanted to move Arenado so bad, is because it frees this situation is no longer a huge talking point.
Oh, it'd be easy to fix.
And
yeah.
exactly. They're moving chess pieces all around. and you can get creative. Nolan's not going to, he is going to play every day, and that's just the situation that you're in. And it's one that, again, could allow this team to be better when we look at the overall record by the end of the year. But it's put you in a tighter spot to maneuver, again, a roster of at least intriguing position players, and maybe at best some guys that all might be able to hit a little bit, and it's just going to be tough to maneuver.
And then the other ones I don't get, is it make or break team trying to win games and go into postseason? That's so far down the road, I'm not even worried about it. But it still is confounding, and that is that Siani is on the team instead of, let's say, Fermin. Siani is Scott, theoretically a lesser version. Certainly in spring training, he was a lesser version. Why do you – it doesn't make any sense to me. You don't have a backup shortstop at all. At all. Yet you've got a backup center fielder and a third guy in Nootbaar who played a bunch of center field. So this one does not make any sense to me. Hopefully somebody will explain it.
Yeah, it shows no forward thinking to me because let's talk outfield for a second. You've got guys that are capable of playing outfield, not including Siani. Nootbaar, Scott, Burleson, Walker, Donovan. That's 5. Am I missing anybody?
That's 5. That's exactly right.
And that's without Siani. So Siani makes 6 that are capable of playing. And the only scenario where Siani plays is as a defensive replacement, but you don't need that because Victor Scott might be better than Siani defensively. So where does he factor in? And like you said, you don't have a true backup for a position that, if you recall, just last year, just a year ago, he wasn't hurt in theory. He got banged up at times as the year went on. But Mason Wynn, they were very selective on how they deployed him. Remember Brandon Crawford being on this team and how often we'd look at a lineup and say, why in the world is Brandon Crawford playing today? It happened a lot. And they were trying to manage Wynn's innings, which I guess, fine, whatever, if that's your plan. Well, now suddenly a year later, you're ready to roll Wynn out there 162 games at a very demanding position.
With a bad wrist?
And coming off of spring training where he was terrible. So what's the plan there? The plan is, we'll throw Donovan there every now and then. Really? That's the plan? And Fermin had a really solid spring training.
Now, if Siani was right-handed and hit some home runs in the spring, I'd go, well, okay, he's still got too many outfielders, but I get it because you need a right-handed bat. But, it doesn't make any sense. Fermin should be there, and I really do think Gorman should probably be at Memphis. It's either he or Walker should be at Memphis, and Koperniak should be on the team.
Yeah, and then it gives you another bat. To play with because right now you don't
offensively challenged team.
Yeah, it's a real puzzling move. And then the coup de grace of all of it, Rammer, Michael McGreevy.
Oh, come on!
This is
insane.
If you gave out a Cy Young for spring training, McGreevy would have it,
and nobody else was close.
No one was close, and you send him down. So I guess
and the quote was something like, "Well, we know where he is if we need him." What? Have you looked at your roster?
Right.
Have you looked at your rotation? You don't need him yet? Get out of here. No sense.
We know where to find him. Well, sure you do. Where else would he be?
Where you sent him. Doesn't make any sense.
I will give them half credit because I like Liberatore in the rotation immediately. Like, he's not your swings. That Matz becomes your swing 6-man, whatever. So I like the fact that Liberatore is in there. Again, I reserve the right to criticize this move later if after 2 starts they suddenly start to waver on it, if Liberatore struggles. Now, in reading all the quotes I saw this week from Ollie, it's and this applies to Victor Scott as well. It's like they're making a decision and saying, these are our guys, for better, for worse. Roll them out there. This is not an audition. They've won the spot. So if there are bumps in the road, if there are struggles, they don't have to look over their shoulder wondering, are they going to get sent back down or sent to the bullpen or whatever? Like Liberatore's the guy. They need to roll with it and see what he can offer, because I still think there's a hidden ceiling with him. And he's gradually, incrementally gotten better the last few years. And I think that maybe they've rewarded him for that. I'm really curious to see what he looks like consistently in the rotation.
Well, here's my other question. And look, as a disclaimer, I get Matt's over the last couple of years has been far superior out of the pen than in the rotation. But he started in the spring and was terrific. He's probably second only to McGreevy in the rotation in the spring. Okay, but you've got a track record for a guy. So that's fine. But here's a guy that only has a one short year track record. And by the way, I loved him last year, but he stunk in the spring, and that's Palante. Yet he's in there and McGreevy's out. And I don't get these things. I don't get it.
I'm cool with Palante, rolling with him, because I think there's some upside. I wonder if the team would ever get to a point with Michaelis or with Matz, for that matter, and they said, we're cutting bait. It's time to go. Now, they're also probably not in much of a position to do that because their pitching depth is still compromised. But I've seen teams over the last few days with veteran players that they either brought back or are the Angels today, Mickey Moniak, who won an arbitration case. See ya. They said, you're gone, and we're trying something else. The Mariners a couple days ago cut Mitch Haniger, who came back to the Mariners and is a veteran that's been around, and it's just like, you're gone. And obviously there was money owed. There's money owed to Michaelis, but this is the last year. It's the last year for Matz. I wonder if it won't get to a point, Rammer, where for those guys, would the Cardinals ever say, if suddenly it's pitching rich, look at all these guys doing well at the minor leagues, if they make a move like that? They haven't shown me they're willing to do it yet. But again, I don't know if they're in position to do it yet because of the lack of depth.
Well, take a look at the Cardinals youth movement. Is what we're doing, right? Although that's not their term. That's my term.
Right.
Starting rotation as it exists today. 3 guys well over 30 years old. And then a 26 and a 25. Is that a youth movement? I say no. The bullpen. Oh, you get young guys in there and all that, right? There's only one guy under 27, and he's almost 27, and Ryan Fernandez. So it's a veteran bullpen.
Yeah.
Where's the youth? Well, they're at Memphis. Is that where you want them? Is that the mixed messaging we get from the Cardinals in the offseason and spring training? It makes your head spin.
It is. It does. It does, Rammer. And I think it also goes to illustrate, again, I sound like a broken record because I say it so often, but whatever this team did over the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, they're so behind the curve when it comes to pitching depth in their minor league system. And the fact that you just said it, the fact that you don't have anybody in your bullpen right now. And again, seemingly,
let me stop you. I think the bullpen's pretty good.
The bullpen, right?
You mean depth-wise, going into the organization?
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. And there isn't that feeder system of guys coming up. And again, I think you're closer. You're closer than you've been. You better be. You better be closer than you were a year ago or 2 years ago. But it's been such a big problem, and I think it stunted this team's growth when it could have, when they were in position to legitimately compete. And that goes back to 2022 and 2023. And and obviously you're well beyond that now, but it's still haunting this team right now. And I don't know how this is going to look as the season progresses. Who does get that call? McGreevy's going to get it and has earned it. But how close is everybody else? How close are all those guys they acquired at the trade deadline a couple of years ago when they sold off, and rightfully so sold off? Tekoa Roby. How close is he? I think there are a lot of names that I want to see on this big league club in 2025 helping this team.
Right.
But the Cardinals have just seemed apprehensive to pull the trigger on some of those guys.
Yeah, Hence, Roberts, Talked about Graceffo.
Cepho,
He's
yeah.
25 now.
Yeah, exactly.
He's kind of you
right.
got to figure out what you're going to do with him.
Yep.
I'm looking at some of the other ones. Roby will be at AA. Cooper Jerpy. I'm looking at some of these guys. So there are some arms, but we've been talking about these guys for a couple of years. Are we really progressing?
Right.
Are we stagnating? I think we'll learn a lot this summer.
You said it. We're talking about a lot of these guys that are still AA and some guys that are AAA and not quite ready to cross that finish line. That's how behind they were in pitching development for so long. And now they're getting it back, but it set this team back multiple years.
Indeed.
What a roster. Yeah, here we are. It's together for better or for worse. And Rammer, I want to talk about some of the guys we think are destined for big years, maybe destined to disappointment when it's all said and done. Hopefully we've got some time for some season predictions and MVP stuff like that. We'll get into that as we move along here. Our Rawlings Redbird Report brought to you by the Rawlings Experience here at Westport Plaza. Check them out and check us out on our YouTube page. Like the video, subscribe, or if you're listening to us here on the Big 550, continue to listen. We're back with more after this on the Big 550.
And now back to the Redbird Report with Brendan Wiese and Bob Ramsey on the Big 550, powered by Rawlings and the Rawlings Experience.
We continue the Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550 KTRS. Brendan Wiese, Bob Ramsey with you as the season gets underway Thursday afternoon all throughout Major League Baseball. So, Rammer, let's start with position players here on the Cardinals. We talked about a lot of them that are on this team, but if I were to give you one player who you thought had the best chance of putting an MVP caliber season together, doesn't mean he's going to win the MVP, but the best MVP bet on the Cardinals, who would you tab?
Contreras.
Yeah.
With a close second in Nootbaar. I think if Nootbaar gets 500 at-bats, 550 at-bats, that he has a chance. But I think Contreras is the bet.
Yeah, and I think for him, he's been so much better than I thought he was capable of when the Cardinals brought him over. And
me too.
With the bat specifically, because obviously he's gone through some trials and tribulations behind the plate. And the Cardinals, I feel like, did everything possible to sabotage him.
Oh, there's no doubt.
For whatever reason.
Insane.
It's so ridiculous. Yet
I believe he has a ring as a catcher.
He does.
Yes.
He does have a ring.
We can't win with him. Really?
Yeah.
I think the proof is on his ring finger.
And the fact that the bat just seems to get better. Like, if he had played a full complement of games last year, I wonder what those numbers look like.
And that's what he's going to get a chance for, because I haven't actually done the math, but memory serves, he averages about 120 games a year as a catcher.
I think so.
Why can't he play 150 as a first baseman? And I think he will, and I think he'll put up big numbers.
I don't know what that ceiling is. Like, it could be eye-popping when it's all said and done. You take that responsibility from behind, and again, especially with the Cardinals, we know everything that they expected out of Contreras, and whether they thought he delivered or didn't, that's still something that Contreras had to deal with on a daily basis. Suddenly now you tell him, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Go out there and hit. Play some first base, acclimate yourself there. Maybe he becomes an all-world first baseman. Who knows? But I feel like there is something untapped there. And just in terms of a bat, man, I don't know.
With you. And he's also a leader. This is going ancient history, but his attitude reminds me a little bit of Orlando Cepeda. Fiery but upbeat and always positive and team guy. And so I have very, very high hopes for Contreras.
So I'm going to go with one of your guys. I'm going to go with Brendan Donovan. If I were to look at an MVP caliber player from this team, and I look at someone that I think we both agreed, as we've talked about many times, that if they could leave Donovan alone at second base, that's his best bet. But I do feel like he's going to play all over the diamond again, and he's going to do it on an everyday basis. And the Cardinals have had this knack in recent years of finding those versatile players that are capable of being like a Ben Zobrist, who I think started to mainstream this role more when he became so integral to both the Royals and the Cubs and their World Series runs, 10 years ago.
You know what you're talking about. I don't know if you remember me telling you this 5-10 years ago. You're looking for somebody to win the Billy Goodman Award.
Yeah.
Billy Goodman for the Red Sox in the early 50s won a batting title without a position.
Right.
And those are the kind, I just love those kinds of guys. Jose Oquendo, Zobrist, you mentioned those kind of guys. Donovan, to me, is that guy. I see a lot of projected lineups with him 3rd and 5th and 6th and even 4th sometimes. I'm not saying he's not capable of that. In fact, go back to 1985 and Tommy Herr hitting 3rd for the Cardinals and driving in 100 runs with single-digit home runs.
I think one of the most amazing stat lines that you're going to see, and obviously it's kind of from a bygone era, and you think about the turf and the speed in front of him and allowed him to do that. Did Clark hit behind him?
Yeah.
So Tommy was 3rd, and
I'm trying to remember now. With Vince Coleman leading off.
Willie,
and then I think it was Ozzie 2nd most of the time. I'd have to look it up. With McGee hitting 5th or 6th,
Gotcha.
I'd have to look that up though.
And that was,
but Willie had that big year.
That was an MVP year for Willie.
He might have hit. I'd have to go back and look at the batting orders.
But it was a great lineup, and you're spot on. And I think with Donovan, so if you were to ask, like another question on top of that, if I were to ask, who'd be your best bet at winning like a batting title? Like I'd have Brendan Donovan at the top of that list on this team. And I'm not sure there's anyone like cut out to be that kind of guy, but I feel like Donovan can be a 300 hitter.
Oh, I think
he
so.
makes good contact. And I feel like there is like one of those seasons where he's not a home run hitter, but he can hit home runs. And do the stars align where he has maybe one of those years where the ball drops in a little more. He gets some of that hit luck, that bat luck, that the balls in play start to land for hits, and maybe a few more exit the ballpark. I think he's capable of a year like that. I want to use a name. I want to use Brady Anderson, but I don't think Brendan's going to hit 50-plus home runs. But again, have that kind of crazy outlier year where you hit more home runs than the rest of your career suggests. I think he could have a year like that. And I just think he's capable of a lot of stat lines, doubles, hits, batting average, on base, walks, all of that. I think runs scored. Like I could see 100 runs scored from Brendan Donovan. Again, a lot has to go right. But I think he can. We use that term in basketball a lot. Remember, he can stuff the stat sheet, I think, when it's all said and done. So I like Brendan Donovan in that spot.
He's a baller and a leader. I don't know. Nobody showed me enough where I think anybody's a 300 hitter except Contreras. Now, is there potential? Yeah. Donovan, yes. Nootbaar, yes. Scott, yes. So I'd love to see all those guys with that approach.
And maybe it's this old school thinking on my part where I side with the lefty bat hitting 300 over the right-handed bat. But in terms of like overall numbers and what we've seen so far, I think you're right to tap Contreras. Hate to go here, but how about a disappointing player, Rammer, that you put your money on by the time the year is over?
Gosh, I hope I'm wrong, because when he's hot, I love watching him hit, and that's Nolan Gorman.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm wrong about that one. Well, I wouldn't wish a bad year on anybody, but I think the two guys, because they haven't really done it, are Gorman and Walker. And so those would be the guys that I think would be earmarked. Neither one would probably last a whole season hitting 200 or below. They'd probably get sent out, which would be appropriate, I think. But that's my concern, that it's one of those two.
We're going to both land in the same boat of, God, I hope this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I'm going to tap Mason Wynn. And there's a lot of extenuating circumstances here. The poor spring, the bad wrist, the lack of a pure plate discipline yet. And that's always a concern of mine. high strikeouts, low walks, and he kind of fits that profile a little bit. The good news for Wynn is that he could struggle at the plate and still deliver defensively, and you hit him at the bottom of the lineup, and he's still super valuable to your team.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's what I would do until he shows he's ready to hit, which is really, I give the Cardinals credit. That's what they did last spring.
Mm-hmm.
And he got hot, and they moved him up, which is great. Oh, but if he's at the bottom, who's the top? Well, your best spring player.
Yep.
A natural leadoff man, and Scott's there, and that's why I get Nootbaar and his high on base being there, but I'd rather have Nootbaar clean up.
Interesting.
In between Contreras and Arenado, and Donovan too, and then you stack them up going on down the line.
Nootbaar is the one guy in the lineup that I really do feel like 1, 2, 3, maybe not 3, but 1, 2, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah,
I could argue and feel good about him in any of those spots. I think he's like one of the few guys that I could see land just about anywhere in the order, not 7, 8, 9.
No,
but because he deserves the at-bats. But I could understand anywhere 1 through 6, maybe other than 3 for Nootbaar. And for Wynn, I do think to take some of that pressure off, hitting him 8th or 9th preferably, is the way to go right now until you feel like he's getting back into a groove a little bit, letting him excel defensively. I tell you, I'd love to see, I'd be content if the batting average plateaus or goes down a little bit and we see the walk rate just slowly start to tick up.
For Wynn.
And because then you're going to get the stolen bases. And I think that's something else. You want to see him run more and use that speed as a weapon.
When you have he and Scott in the lineup, it's got to be a big part of your offensive equation.
If they're both cooking, man, that speed, that'd be a lot of fun. And add a different dynamic to this Cardinals lineup.
And having some fun, let's face it, it's a business. You want to sell tickets. May not be winning, but if the fans are having fun at the ballpark, St. Louis Cardinal fans for 100 years love the running game. 100 years. Love the running game. Give it to them. You've got the speed to do it.
You got the players to do it. Absolutely right. Bob Ramsey, Brendan Wiese with you. It's our Rawlings Redbird report on the Big 550 and our Big 550 KTRS digital platforms. Let's take another break. Let's get to some predictions. Maybe a breakthrough player, offense and defense. Maybe who gets dealt before the deadline, and some picks for the postseason, MVP, Cy Young, World Series. We'll get into all of that coming up. It is our Rawlings Redbird report on the Big 550.
You're listening to the Redbird Report on the Big 550.
Powered by Rawlings and the Rawlings Experience.
All right, let's get to some predictions here. A few more predictions before our season opening show, the Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550. Brendan Wiese, Bob Ramsey. Like the video if you're watching on our KTRS digital platforms. Rammer, we'll go both positives here. Breakthrough player. Let's start on the position. All right, let's get to some predictions here. In terms of interpretation, what do we mean by breakthrough? Kind of our season opening it however you want. The Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550. Position player and we see breaking out for the Cardinals the video if you're watching on our KTRS.
I'm going to go with a guy I'm already in love with.
Rammer, we'll go both positives here. Breakthrough player. Let's start on the position.
And I don't think he's going to catch.
And again, loose in terms of interpretation. What do we mean by breakthrough? I'll let you interpret it however you want here.
110, 120
position player breaking out for the Cardinals in 2025.
He may get a handful at DH, maybe even more than a handful. I think this guy is a dangerous hitter and is going to have a breakout year.
I think that's and you've consistently been on him all spring long. The bat is there. Again, can you find a way to live with any growing pains behind the plate? Because I want to see Ivan Herrera north of. Can we get him 500 plate appearances, Rammer? Is that consistently been on him all spring long?
The Cardinals,
the
honestly, they just don't like his defense. I think it's a little unfair, especially when you don't have a real answer. I know Pages is theoretically a little better.
I want to see Ivan Herrera
remind me of Molina or Bench.
Can we get him 500 plate appearances, Rammer?
He seemed fine, and is that really is that much praise? Oh, he's fine, and he is.
Yeah.
But you got to play the bat. You got to.
And I think at some point you hope maybe your pitchers are able to keep potential base runners, potential base stealers a little closer to pitching. The pitchers do some more. I just if teams going to be running anyway, and the advantage is more towards the base runner than ever before. Bases are a little bigger. We've seen. I think at some point you hope maybe go up here the last couple of years. Potential base that's runners, just part of the game. Base stealers a little closer. If you don't have a Yachty who's capable of gunning on anybody, and he's going to be running anyway. Like most catchers won't shut that down. The base you live with than ever before.
And don't get anybody on first.
There you go. Exactly right. The running. Exactly right. Go up here. Breakthrough player for me, Rammer. That's just part of the game. I'm going to go a little outside the box here because I don't have a Yachty who's capable of. He won't get a ton of plate appearances. And it's just like I think he establishes himself as a legit big league home run hitter. And I'm talking about Luke and Baker. There you go. Exactly right. So when it's all said and done, can you get Baker somewhere between 200 and 300 plate appearances? I'm going to go a little outside the box.
Home runs, 15 home runs with that.
I think so. I think so too. But I think suddenly, if you're the Cardinals, you can start to big league home run hitter. And I'm talking about envision Luke and Baker. What does that look like then? So when it's all said and done, can you get Baker somewhere between 200 and 300 plate appearances? Is he someone that starts to deserve more plate appearances? Yeah. The power. I think so too. And then suddenly, if you're the Cardinals, you can start to as often as you can. Against left-handed, what does that look like then? And then suddenly you start to. You could again maybe there is a legit platoon situation with deserve more plate appearances with Burleson and Baker. The power is legit. A lot of other guys that are going to give him those chances. Those as often to me, I think can really form left-handed, a pretty lethal left-handed arms, left-right combo, and then suddenly you start to. And Baker's the power's there. Maybe there is a legit platoon situation.
I agree with that, and he's earned it
with Burleson and Baker.
No, this is who he is.
Exactly right. A lot of other guys that are going to get chances.
If there's a lefty on the mound, Baker
to me, I think could really form 100% a pretty. And then if you're Ali Marmol and Baker's in game, the power's there. You've got a lot of lefty bats that probably. You won't feel great about going up against the lefty late in the ball game.
Exactly right.
How do you, as a manager, deploy then that big bopper where you have one crack at it,
100%,
and then if you're maybe and if you're Ali Marmol, and maybe he'll never get the face, and maybe the manager we've got a lot of lefty bats. I don't know, but I think there are some spots where Ali can show those managerial chops late in the ball game. With a weapon that I don't think he's had, bopper. So you have one crack at it. It's sort of like what. Maybe Albert was, and maybe he'll never get the face before he manager. It's just like I don't know, but I think there are some spots maybe the best hitter on the team. Show those second half of the season. He was kind of like that in that spot with a weapon that I don't think he's had that so far. That's just like a. It's sort of like what Albert was at times in 2022 before he gets just like.
And
when he showed
Michael
he was
McGreevy.
maybe the best hitter on the team second half of the season. He was kind of like that in that spot. I think
whether
Baker
it's
gives
Grace
you
remaining
that
sick,
option.
faltering by Palante or somebody else, and I'm gonna go with McGreevy.
I think that's the path is there, right? I mean, he's done everything that's been asked of him so far. Get called up last year, all he does is wow. Gets a chance in spring training. Is your best arm. And I don't like the fact he's where he's at. He should be at the big leagues right now.
Right.
But I like the fact that he's had to face adversity consistently and he's answered the bell. This is something else where I'm sure he's not super pleased about going back to Memphis, but he's answered that bell. And I think it's built some character in him. I think that's a great pick. I think we look up by the time the year is over and McGreevy's dealing. I'm going to go with the guy that they tabbed the fifth starter. I'm going to go with Liberatore. And part of this is a little wish casting for me because I don't ultimately know what Liberatore's ceiling is. I mentioned it's kind of he's gotten better incrementally these last few years. But I you get a lefty starter in there. I think that's something they wanted. I think he showed he was a real weapon out of the bullpen. This is probably his last chance to stick. I hope that as a starter. I hope the Cardinals give him enough rope here to at least half the season, right? You got to see what he has and then evaluate from there and evaluate after each start. But Liberatore, I think, could really deliver And the fact that I know he's getting the opportunities to start Rammer, maybe almost by default, I go with Liberatore, but he'd be my guy.
Yeah, and a former first-round pick. He's still only 25 years old. Now, that's that borderline prospect suspect.
Yeah.
And we've been wondering about him for a couple of years, but you said it, seeing things incrementally, a little bit at a time. And so perhaps this is the time. But if he does falter and is not a disaster, I think there's still time for him to continue to develop.
Rammer, let's go with some final predictions here for the next few minutes. And let's start with what it takes for the Cardinals. What's the recipe for the Cardinals to be competitive in 2025?
To me, I think they've got to embrace the running game and score a run, and embrace not power and try and force feed power, but embrace every 90 feet. And if they do that, I believe enough power will come. Because if they go power alone, they just don't pack the gear, man. They don't pack the gear to try and outslug people. You got some guys, several that can hit 25 home runs? Yeah. But other teams are going with guys that hit 35 and 45. And so let your power hitters hit and embrace the running game. That's what they've got to do to be successful.
I'm gonna talk about a guy here that we haven't talked about really at all, other than his impact on shaping this roster, and that's Nolan Arenado. What is Nolan in 2025? And if he comes anywhere close, he doesn't have to be the guy from 2022, but he's got to be better than he's been the last couple of years. And if he can rediscover some of that old form, I wonder if the rest of the team doesn't fall in line behind him, because you're looking for that. You're looking for your guy. And you mentioned Contreras, and I think he is that emotional, vocal leader that is huge to have. But I also feel like Arenado's the superstar. And if your superstar's delivering, I wonder if that doesn't inject a little energy into this club, because then suddenly they can think, okay, Nolan's doing this. I don't think he's leaving. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe we can kind of kick the tires on contending in this division. I hate to put it all on one guy, but I do kind of feel like he is that linchpin, because if he's struggling and he's not going anywhere, Rammer, I feel like that. I feel like it's going to have the same kind of impact, but in the opposite direction. Where
he'd be an albatross.
Exactly right. And he weighs you down, and you feel like, what can we do? There's nothing we can do.
I think Nolan, if healthy, give you 25 and 80 in the 5-hole. I don't think he's a cleanup guy for you. I don't think he's a number 3 guy. I like him 5th with a lefty between Contreras and him. And at that spot, and probably with somebody like Burleson behind him, I think he can give you 25 and 80. I really do.
Who wins this division, Rammer?
No one. No one can win the division.
Who, but by default, has the most wins at the end of the year?
Major League Baseball in a first is going to say no one from this division is eligible for postseason. You all stink. Having said that, I honestly, because of the bullpen, think the Cardinals have as good a shot as anybody.
I know. It's kind of crazy.
And I think this could be a year where a team wins the division with a couple of games under 500 record. I think it's really, truly possible.
If that's the case, and I think it could be, give me the Pirates. Give me the team with the best rotation in this division. Little bit, can they get enough offense is the big question. I don't know if they can. Brian Reynolds has to rediscover his form when he was rookie of the year. He really has. He really has. I think Reynolds has to have a big year, but that rotation is stacked. The
Reds will be fun to watch, but they always find a way to lose. The Brewers have come back to the pack. One team, but they've got to get a bunch of things to go their way, which is not a good plan, by the way. But if they do, the Cubs could be formidable. I think it's a stretch, but I don't want to discount them.
They got Kyle Tucker, and they're showing that they're ready to win.
Yeah.
And could that mean they make moves at the deadline to better their chances? I think they're probably the one team that would do that of all the Central Division teams. MVPs, Rammer, any thoughts here? AL, NL, MVPs?
In the league, I don't know how you, going into the season, you pick against Ohtani.
Right. He's exactly. Me too.
I don't know how you do that. And, but it'll be a race between he and Soto. That'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in the American League, I didn't give this question much thought. If Judge can stay healthy, he's an obvious pick up and down the American League. Give me a second to think about it. Who do you like in the AL?
In the American League, I am going to, and I had thought about this between a couple of guys, Mike Trout being one, and I think Trout has a bounce back year. But I'm going to give it to Julio Rodriguez with the Seattle Mariners.
Oh,
and I
that's
think
a stretch.
I think that's a guy that's ready to sort of reclaim what looked like. I mean, he was on a rocket ship here a couple of years ago, and then has really backed off. Julio's kind of a bounce back and kind of an outlier pick, but instead of just going Judge, I'm going to go Julio.
I take somebody, one of those young guns from the Orioles, maybe. Red
Sox are loaded. Red Sox have a lot of options.
Bregman would have a shot.
Yeah, I think Bregman's
hitting
a good
third
call.
in that lineup.
Yeah.
I'll go with
that.
If I don't go with Aaron Judge, that's my first choice. I'll go with Bregman too.
I like it. Wrapping us up. How about a World Series pick?
How do you pick against the Dodgers?
Yeah.
Now, injuries and rotational things could come back to bite them. They played all spring shorthanded. If they can get their guys in there, they're the prohibitive pick, I think. Probably with the Mets too.
I've got the Dodgers coming out of the National League, and I think in the American League, again, a lot of different ways to go here, but I like the team you just mentioned. I think Boston is positioned themselves very quickly. That everyday lineup is pretty scary, and that kind of gives me some hope for the Cardinals and what Chaim Bloom has his fingerprints on a lot of those guys in that lineup for the Red Sox. They can hit, and they've done enough with their staff to I think they're going to be pretty good. So give me the Sox.
And one more National League team that I like a lot. On paper, not as good as the Dodgers, but paper picks don't usually work out, and I still really like the Padres.
Like it.
I like them a lot. They're fun to watch.
Rammer, great stuff. Enjoy the season.
I'm ready to get her going, and a lot of people are asking me, boy, you're not very excited this year, huh? I go, no, I am. It's baseball. Baseball's here, and you got a shot.
Rammer, enjoy it.
Thanks,
appreciate
Bob.
Mitch and Lily getting us set up here on the program. We'll continue to roll it out for you during the regular season. Our Rawlings Redbird Report on the Big 550, KTRS, and our KTRS digital platforms.